Right, welcome to this January meeting of the Council. May I first remind you of some domestic arrangements. Toilets are situated outside the meeting room opposite the stairs. Cold water is also available in the breakout area outside the meeting room. The fire alarm should sound. Please leave the meeting room by following the fire exit signs and meet on the Ipswich Town Football Club training pitch. Do not re-enter the building until you're told it is safe to do so. And please switch off all mobile phones or turn them to silent. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed except for their confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you'll be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this room, you are also consenting to being filmed by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film or photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. Finally, can members and officers please ensure you press the red microphone for speaking and turn off when you're finished. Can I move to the agenda, please? Are you ready, Tim? Item number 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Turner.
Item number 2, declaration of interest by councillors. Are there any declarations? Okay, moving on to item number 3, MC/19/30, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on 24th of October 2019 for accuracy only. Are there any issues with accuracy? Councillor Stringer.
Page 8. Page 8. Where it says paragraph 1514, it said that we agreed to change emergency climate change to climate emergency change. Actually, we agreed that it should be climate change emergency.
Can we get that changed? Okay, cool. Is that the only one? Can I have a proposer for the minutes, please? Thank you, Councillor Brewster. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Guthrie. All those in favour? And that's carried. Item number 4, Chairman's announcements. I refer you to paper MC/19/31 to be noted. Item number 5, Leaders' announcements. I would like to invite Councillor Morley to present her update.
Thank you, Chair. Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome back to our council chamber. I hope you all managed to have at least a few restful days in the time since we were last here. Just before Christmas, Peter Garrett sent out a very informative update on what has been done by the Public Realm team and the extensive range of day-to-day activities that the team undertakes. Peter also said that the team will be offering ward tours to enable members to see the team's work at first hand in their wards. The things that the team does have a direct and highly visible effect on the quality of residents' lives, and there is growing interest in the management of our open spaces for well-being and the environment. Our proposals for tree planting and biodiversity corridors will also mean working directly with our communities. Peter also mentioned a new 5-year programme of playsite improvements, so please contact Peter Garrett to arrange a tour and discuss improvements that you would like to see in your wards. Just a reminder that Kate Parnham has sent out an email about the mandatory equality and diversity training. There are still some members who are yet to attend, and further dates will be announced soon. This is actually a very good and enlightening session, and I do recommend it. And just to reiterate, it is mandatory, and being a Suffolk County Councillor or a Police and Crime Commissioner does not exempt you from this. I welcome the discussions held with Councillor Eburn and Councillor Field to strengthen our working relationships between the groups for the good of our residents. We are looking together at how meetings, briefings and reports can be streamlined. I met with Dr. Dan last week, and I was pleased to be able to share our direction of travel and understand in more detail what government's priorities are likely to be in the future. And I'm looking forward to informally meeting along with Councillors Ward, Hicks and Passmore, and with fellow public sector leaders tomorrow. And I will be attending the District Council Network Conference to represent Mid Suffolk in early February. Thank you.
So, agenda item 6, to receive notifications of petitions in accordance with council procedure rules.
Thank you, Chair. None received.
Number 7, questions by the public in accordance with council procedure rules.
Thank you, Chair. None received.
Item 8, questions by councillors in accordance with council procedure rules.
None received, Chair.
Agenda item 9, to receive reports from cabinet members. We've received plenty of questions in advance of the meeting. It is my intention to limit the discussion of this item to 30 minutes. I will therefore draw the questioning to a close after 30 minutes has elapsed, if the item has not already been concluded. I would like to invite Councillor Morley to introduce this item.
Yes. Following discussions with Councillor Field and Councillor Eburn, the portfolio holder reports, which come to Full Council quarterly, will in future be coming to Cabinet also quarterly. We've discussed this in quite a bit of detail, and very often we found that the answers to the questions in the reports are contained within the performance monitoring reports that come to Cabinet. And so our intention is to expand the performance monitoring reports to include some of the detail and more explanation that is currently in the portfolio holder reports. And so this is the last set of portfolio holder reports that will be coming to Full Council.
Right, so we'll move on to the questions. I believe Councillor Wellham has a question for the Cabinet Member for Communities. Councillor Eburn.
Sorry, Chair, I had a question. I wanted to ask a question on the report CMU10, if I may. I understand that we've set aside £1 million to mitigate commercial risk for Mid Suffolk growth, and I wanted to understand whether the portfolio holder thinks that that is sufficient funding, and what was the decision behind it being £1 million. Thank you.
And would you like to reply?
I think you're referring to the £1 million that we are putting in our budget for this coming year. We've also put some money aside in the past. It's pretty much a question of how long is a piece of string, but the commercial developments we are undertaking, where there be at the middle schools out at Paddock Eye, and I think particularly the Gateway 14 development, which is obviously going to be coming to Full Council in February. That's a very large greenfield site that we intend to develop, and it just feels prudent to myself that, bearing in mind that, for example, on that where it's being financed on borrowing, that until such time as we see the fruits of that starting to come in, it seemed prudent to put aside money and not perhaps recognise some of that interest receivable until such time as we can be totally assured of the success of the project.
Thank you.
Right, we're going to move to the questions that we've already had in advance, and the first one I've got is for you, Keith, to ask for the councillor, for the Cabinet Member for Communities.
Chair, to save part of the 30 minutes being taken up, I think the questions are all there, so perhaps we could just have the answers.
Look back in your inbox, I think you'll find it. And then the information I'll provide now is the information was provided to you in July of last year, shortly after the project was launched, and there is a reference in paragraph 3.9 of my report. But I'm pleased that you have given me the opportunity to provide further detail. Within Mid Suffolk, Gislingham Primary School has had an initial meeting, as have St Botolph's, is that, in Botesdale, and Cedars Park. How do you pronounce it? Botolph's. and Cedars Park Primary. Thorndon has been in touch to express interest. The furthest ahead are Freeman, your school, and Abbots Hall, primaries in Stow Upland, and Stowmarket, who both have action plans in place. The project is focused on helping these schools increase physical activity among their students. Council officers have contacted schools directly to encourage their involvement and explain the role of Active Suffolk, who have been commissioned to deliver on behalf of the council. The project is jointly funded through funding from Public Health and directly from the council's communities budget.
Councillor Ram, I have 3 questions here. Would you like to read them out so that it's on the film?
Certainly, yes. Well, can I follow up with that? The important question there was, is there direct involvement in the project from officers and members? Is this something that the schools have been told about and then they've got to get on with it? Because I certainly haven't had any direct involvement with Freeman. When I go into the school fairly frequently, I've heard nothing about active schools in the Freeman School in Stow Upland. So I would like to know whether officers are involved and if they are encouraging members to become involved. I'm not sure I had an answer to how is the project funded. The next question was, could we have an update on the proposed park run in Stowmarket, please? Have negotiations on use of the land for the Chiltern Fields route been completed, or has another route been considered? And could we have an update on the leisure strategy, please, in particular, the strategy for providing leisure services in remote areas? Thank you.
Back to the schools, it has been commissioned, as Active Suffolk have been commissioned by the funding. Okay, so basically it's a 3-year programme, and what has happened, the schools can have extra help to deliver sport where they haven't got that specialism, but it's about how they get to school, if they walk to school, what they do in class, if they get up and have a run about in between maths. So it's a little bit of everyday activity along with the sports. If you'd like to go in and, I'm sure we can arrange that, but we have commissioned Active Suffolk to take that role. And we put 50,000 into that funding. Yes. And your next answer on the public park run. Okay, public realm officers have taken the lead on this project and met with Councillor Mansell last week. All Saturday morning users of Chiltern Fields have now been contacted seeking confirmation that proposed timing would not conflict with any existing activities on the site, including football, rugby and cricket clubs. Each of these groups have been advised that Councillor Mansell would be event director and that all of the parkrun volunteers are keen to look at and address any potential issues, i.e. bottleneck points. By walking the route as part of the site meeting, Sarah has also made all groups aware that Councillor Mansell is in discussion with the other local sites about potential local parking for parkrun participants nearby, but not at the Chiltern Hills Fields, as parking is one of the concerns raised. A face-to-face meeting is being set up with the clubs in the next 3 weeks. Your next one was the leisure strategy, providing leisure services in remote areas. The Leisure, Sport and Physical Activity Strategy, LSPAS, delivery has focused on redeveloping and refurbishing the Council's own main leisure centres in Stowmarket and Stradbroke. These are invest to save projects that, when complete, will generate annual revenue savings to the Council, an element of which will be used to establish resourcing within the community's team to develop the proposed outreach programmes. Negotiations are currently underway with everyone active to agree not only the redevelopment refurbishments of the leisure centres, but also to consider their proposals to provide a community outreach resource. The detail of their proposals is now being considered to establish their delivery programme, which is a new role for them and currently due to commence from the start of their new contract in October 2020, subject to the relevant approvals. Another important project supporting provision in more remote areas is the Active Wellbeing Project referred to at paragraph 3.8 of my report. Delivery in Mid Suffolk has been focused around Fressingfield and Stradbroke, Debenham and Eye. I won't rehearse the information provided within the report in answer to this question, but impact is being monitored and the further information is available on the website in your papers. And on that note, I'd like to please welcome to our team Vicky Mosley, and she now becomes the new corporate manager for communities. And Vicky, stand up so everybody knows who to come to. Great. I hope that makes us at capacity now, does it, Tom? Yeah.
Right, next question. Councillor Mellon, I believe you've got 2 questions for the Cabinet Member for the Environment.
Yes, I'll crack on with these. I'd hate us to miss out on the last question from Barry Humphries at the end of the list. In the report, it talks about scoping out a new waste depot site, and the question I have is, has Gateway 14 been considered as a potential location for the new depot?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. Yes, it is being considered, along with 2 other sites.
Allowed to come back with a supplementary? Yeah, good. Would the Cabinet Member agree with me that Gateway 14 presents a wonderful opportunity to integrate energy generation and trial new technologies such as hydrogen generation from solar PV and even from wind power, with the potential to power our waste collection vehicles as has been trialling elsewhere in the country?
Yes, I absolutely do agree with you, and I would like to see some really innovative projects come into this site. Aspirationally, even perhaps looking at hydrogen battery technology and some of the more adventurous things that we really should be looking at. So yes, indeed.
Thank you for that answer. Moving on, noting that Mid Suffolk's membership of the Suffolk Climate Change Partnership has resulted in a number of properties benefiting from the bulk buying scheme, will there be a further round of the scheme in 2020, and could the scheme be widened to include perhaps solar hot water panels?
The scheme is currently running, but the the period for registering with the current opening period ended on the 17th of January. So the next possible opening is going to probably be in August, but I have spoken to Solar Together and they can't confirm exactly when that will be. But it usually happens twice a year, so we're expecting a summer opportunity for the group buying participation. In terms of thermal hot water generation, at the moment that is not being offered through Solar Together. I have spoken to them, and if enough interest is expressed from, not just from us obviously, but from around the country, then that may be something they'll offer in the future, but it's not offered at the moment.
Councillor Humphries, I believe you have a question.
Madam Chair, thank you. Before we begin, obviously there's a typo on the questions in regards to my name. And what's more annoying is it's not my full title, which is of course Mary Berry Humphries. But now you all know me, I'll go on with the question. As most councillors will be aware, the Forestry Commission runs tree planting grant schemes, and the government also runs the Urban Tree Planting Scheme. Please can you reassure me, and obviously the other councillors, that the Climate Emergency Task Force is fully considering the issue of tree coverage in Mid Suffolk and how best to identify land suitable for tree planting and then fund the planting of more trees? And I'll come to the second question after your answer. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Humphries. Yes, the task force is taking tree planting very seriously and is committing to improve tree coverage in the district. We are aware of the grant schemes and the funding available. I would point out that the Urban Tree Challenge Fund grant is for 50% of the cost of planting. The remainder has to be found through a match funding process. So it's not as if the grant will pay for all of it. We're currently assessing the criteria for how these funds can be used and utilised in Mid Suffolk. Once the assessment is complete, we will be looking at opportunities to bring forward land, and part of the task force work is of course to identify where and what land is suitable for tree planting. And I think because it is, we're looking particularly at the urban tree challenge. We're aware that trees in urban areas perform a lot of useful tasks, cleaning up the air and providing shade, etc., etc. So we will be looking at areas like Stowmarket and some of our other towns, market towns, to where additional trees could be usefully introduced. Further tree planting initiatives will be discussed at the next task force meeting.
Madam Chair. Thank you. The second question, and thank you, Councillor Mellon, for giving me time to ask this one. Since the creation of the ETG, what projects have been started and what projects do you have in mind for the immediate future?
Right, we haven't actually really started any projects per se. The purpose of the task force is to identify projects, get funding, get a cabinet approval, get funding for them, and get them in place as soon as possible. But obviously projects that need funding need to be approved through the cabinet process. We have so far met and discussed energy, building design and biodiversity, and the next item on our agenda to discuss is transport and waste. That's coming up in February. In terms of what we've actually done, we have commissioned a baseline survey of emissions in Mid Suffolk, and this is being conducted by Groundworks. We are also working closely with Suffolk County Council and the work they're doing through a company called Ricardo, which is a Suffolk-wide assessment of carbon emissions, because obviously the work of the districts needs to fit in with the work of the county and to be done in a comparable way. We're looking at scopes 1, 2 and 3 emissions, so we are looking as widely as possible at the environmental impact of our activities. We will be looking at recommendations for actions to address areas of high emissions. Once we get that data, we will probably be focusing on a couple of areas that we expect to be recommended for our attention and investment.
Thank you. Councillor Maston, I believe you have a question for the Cabinet Member for Finance.
Yes, thank you. Noting that our staff are members of the Suffolk-wide Local Authorities Pension Scheme, is our representative pressing for divestment from all fossil fuel investments, bearing in mind our climate change commitments clearly?
Would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to thank Councillor Matheson for his question. Just a bit of background. In 2019, I was appointed as a trustee of the Suffolk Pension Fund to represent all the district and borough councils in Suffolk. So that means not only Mid Suffolk, but also West Suffolk, East Suffolk, Bayber and Ipswich. And the pension fund exists to pay the pension benefits of over 60,000 members from over 300 separate employees in the fund, and invests over £3 billion of pension fund monies. And the committee has a fiduciary duty to protect and target an approximate risk-adjusted investment return. And because it's a defined benefit scheme, any shortfall arising from performance or from funding has to be met by the employers, and therefore ultimately the risk and any additional cost is that of our council taxpayers. So the committee invests money in a wide range of assets with a diverse set of investment managers to discharge that fiduciary duty. We've got 2 active equity managers who are tasked to outperform their respective indices by selecting and holding shares which they believe will outperform. And that process involves them taking into account all information available, including climate change. It also invests equities through passive investment funds, and these invest in all the shares in a given index to guarantee returns in line with that market. But recently, the committee transferred just under 40% of that passive equity investments into a climate-aware passive fund. And they've done that without altering the expected investment return. So I feel this demonstrates the committee's commitment to taking climate change into account while still firmly meeting its fiduciary duty responsibilities. And also both through its investment managers and by its membership of the Local Authority Pension Fund Forum, the committee engages with all the companies in which it directly invests to improve environmental, social and governance practices. And of course such dialogue includes with those companies in adopting how they look at effective climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mansell, have you got a question for the Cabinet Member for Housing?
Thank you, Chair. I did send in 3 questions for the Cabinet Member for Housing, but as I'm the new structure of this meeting has only just been explained to me, first of all, could I ask, how do I ask any other questions other than the 3 I managed to think of before today?
That would depend on if we've got time at the end after all the other questions have been answered.
I think it would have been more helpful if we knew that this was going to be the format beforehand. I feel very stifled by having a time limit when some of the answers are quite long and some of the questions are quite short. And I feel it's a little bit unfair if I am restricted from answering questions because some of the answers are quite lengthy. But anyway, my first question to the Cabinet Member for Housing is about the proportion of universal credit recipients who have alternative payment agreements. This appears to have risen in the last 6 months from approximately 58% to over 70%. Firstly, am I correct that this method is used only to clear rent arrears? And is there anything that we as a council are doing or can do to ensure that this figure does not continue to rise and to help those claimants manage their budgets in future?
Thank you, Councillor Mansell. Alternative payment arrangements, or APAs, have increased in line with the number of our tenants who are in receipt of universal credit and are in rent arrears. As the rollout of universal credit continues, we would also expect to see an increase in the number of APAs. APAs can be used for tenants who are not in rent arrears, for example, where there are addiction problems, mental health issues, learning difficulties, or they were previously homeless. However, we normally only request an APA if a tenant is in arrears, and the decision will follow a discussion with the tenant. Once an APA is in place, the rent account will be regularly reviewed and contact made with the tenant. As the tenant gets close to clearing their arrears, we would discuss with them ending the APA. Some tenants may feel confident that they will be able to manage once the arrangement comes to an end, but others may prefer to continue for a time. Regarding budgetary support for claimants, when a tenant first moves on to universal credit, their work coach will refer them for budgeting support. The income officers will also discuss with the tenant and can make further referrals if required. This might be to teams within the council, such as the tenancy support officers, or to external organisations such as Citizens Advice, Step Change or Home Group. The income team have also started calling all new tenants within the first 2 weeks of their tenancy. This has allowed us to identify issues much earlier and provide support before rent arrears become unmanageable. The benefits of this approach include the opportunity to build rapport with new tenants, making sure the tenants know who to go to if they get into difficulties with their rent, and assisting with universal credit claims. Is that okay?
Have you got a supplementary question?
Could I just come back? I understand completely that the number of people who are on alternative payment agreements will rise with the number of people who are on universal credit. I completely understand that, but my question was about the fact that the percentage of those people on universal credit who are in receipt of APAs is going up. It's not rising with it, it is rising faster than the rise of people on universal credit, and that's what concerned me in that question.
Shall I go on to my other question? The other two questions that I have are much shorter questions, but who knows how long the answers are going to be. Are there any future plans to provide more properties for the Stay Close project with Suffolk County Council? And my other one, which is quite short, I may as well do it now. What is the timeline for presenting the business case for the joint venture building service programme to either Cabinet or Council? And maybe you can confirm which it's to be.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. There are, the Council is working closely with Suffolk County Council to understand all of their housing requirements, not only for Staying Close but also for other client groups, including those with specialist accommodation needs such as learning disabilities. We have a meeting scheduled to discuss what their needs are and agree what is feasible for Mid Suffolk to assist with. It is important we work closely with SCC, particularly around our corporate parenting responsibilities. But we also need to balance the demand through the housing register and those households currently placed in temporary accommodation. Your next question, the timeline. This is with our joint venture. Work is ongoing in developing the legal framework for which the joint venture would operate within. This involves separate legal advice on employment and tax. Work is ongoing in ensuring that the financials with respect to the current service and the cost of the JV are comparable and robust. Regular updates to staff in the form of meetings, weekly newsletters, a restructure of the service to align it with our aspirations going forward, a review of our contract with Blue Flame, whom are a member of the flagship group, wider awareness and involvement through shadowing, and I'm going out with the team next week. Huge amounts of effort in developing current service delivery. This has included interim management and improvements such as renegotiating our materials contract and identifying new ways of working for staff that improves productive as well as employee satisfaction. So I haven't got the answer to the timeline because this has taken up a little bit more time to get it right before it comes to Cabinet, but we are working very closely with Flagship at the moment to try and get everything in place. I don't know if Gavin's got any more on that, but we are going ahead with everything as planned, and I can confirm that just by getting involved with Flagship at this time, our savings on materials are fantastic because of the buying power. So we're already seeing the benefit of our actually trying to come to an agreement on how it's all going to work. So we're already benefiting on the ground, on the work front, if you like. Have you got a timeline, Gavin? I don't think we have quite yet, have we?
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. Just in regards to timeline, we're still working on a timeline in which we bring a report back to Cabinet in May or June at the latest. I did update the administration at a briefing only in the last sort of 2 months where we were able to discuss the plans and some of the challenges that we've currently got in developing that.
Thank you. Councillor Masson, you've got a question for the Cabinet.
Yes,
Member.
I'd be very happy to just have drawn the question to the attention of the two portfolio holders, and I look forward to hearing in due course what the answers are, but no need to try and do it today.
Okay, Councillor Scarf, you've got a question for the Cabinet Member for Planning.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As a member of the Joint Council Planning Charter Review Group, which has only met once on August the 6th, can you advise as to progress on this issue? My understanding was that officers would be looking at a merging of the two separate planning charters and reporting back to the review group with a draft combined charter so that members could comment as the next stage in the process.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Scarf. Since the original meeting of the working group in August, significant work has been undertaken to review the Charter, taking into account examples of best practice from other local authorities. As such, a draft has now been completed and has been sent to the Cabinet members for planning for comment before it is presented to the working group. It has taken longer than anticipated to conduct this work due to the general election where democratic services officers worked to help ensure the election ran smoothly. With regards to the proposed visits to other councils, that's member visits to other councils to see how they operate, these were also delayed by the election as the democratic services teams were heavily involved in the election and advised that they could not facilitate a visit at that time to showcase their best practice. However, the Democratic Services team are currently organising the visits to other councils, and members will be invited to these shortly. And once these visits have taken place, a formal meeting of the working group will be organised. I will be meeting with my fellow portfolio holder from Baber on the 11th of February, along with the monitoring officer and chief planning officer, to review their progress on this and to discuss the potential to agree common ground in relation to key topics within the Charter in order to assist the prompt work of the review group.
Councillor Eburn, you have a question?
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I think it's very disappointing that, given the words of our leader, Councillor Morley, talking about cooperation between groups, that we've had this restriction placed upon us at the meeting and not been advised of it in advance. And I please ask you, Madam Chairman, that doesn't happen again, and that in future that if you're changing any structure of this council meeting, that we actually have some kind of liaison between the group leaders, please. I do have a question really about neighbourhood plans and the support for them. Many of our communities have got neighbourhood plans in place, and as the joint local plan is becoming more developed, it will get to the stage where the joint local plan is made and the neighbourhood plans need reviewing. So have we got enough staff in place to support our neighbourhood plan groups to ensure that they can review their neighbourhood plans to make sure that they fit with the joint local plan as that's progressing? Thank you very much. Thank you.
I have to admit that I'm not aware of the situation with regard to staffing on that particular issue. I don't know whether...
in due course then?
Tom might be able to assist us with that one. Yeah.
Short answer, yes. That does depend upon how much support individual groups need and want, and it's our role to support, not to write on behalf of. So where there are particular communities that anticipate a level of resource from the council that is essentially writing the plan on their behalf, we won't be doing that for them. But we do have bespoke resource in the form of Paul, who's there to help coordinate and organise and help signpost people. But we've also embedded across the entire planning policy team that officers there, from the senior officers through, will be there to support people. We've been supporting with mapping and other things, and we've just recovered our GIS specialists so that we're able to provide that support as well.
Thank you very much.
Right, I've had, now the half hour is up, but I've got 3 more people with questions that we're going to have, starting with Councillor Mansell.
Thank you, Chair. I have one question for the portfolio holder for planning and one for environment, if that's allowed. In your report for the planning portfolio holder, section 4.1 refers to the planning referrals meeting that we have next Wednesday. And I'm a little concerned, and I have had comments from members of the public sent to me regarding the fact that we have over 1,000 pages to read and digest in a week. And this is a very large task, and I think really, it would have been nicer. How come, it's going to be very difficult for us. So was there any way that we could have had a little bit more notice so we had time? I don't think we're going to give our communities justice. That is my question for planning. Shall I do that one and then come back with the environment one, or do them at the same time? Right, and my question for the portfolio holder for environment is about the new packaging materials that manufacturers are being encouraged, well, they seem to be branding them as environmentally friendly and calling them compostable packaging. But we here in Mid Suffolk, and I don't think we're alone, do not have the facilities to compost these so-called compostable packages. And it's a case of, are we informing our population that you can't put these in your brown bin, you can't put them on a compost heap, and similarly, and follow on from that, are we in Mid Suffolk going to do anything about getting an industrial composter so that we can deal with these compostable waste, or are we campaigning with government that these things should not be branded as being environmentally friendly?
Okay, David, would you like to start?
Well, yes, I'll make a start on that one, or on the one you asked of me. That was the capacity of committee members and so on, and the public to digest 1,000 pages of reports for a particular planning meeting. I think the person best qualified to answer that is not myself, but a member or a chair of the planning committee, and I might well ask Councillor Guthrie if she'd give her views on that, please.
Yes. Well, I recall the last time we had the Thurston meeting, I've just actually looked it up, it was 1,985 pages, and we actually had a planning B in the morning as well. It is extremely difficult, it's extremely challenging, but equally, all planning committees, the papers are published, and then you have that week. So it is very, very difficult. And I will be discussing that with Councillor Hicks and various chief executive and so on regarding comments that we have been received. But it is normal to have only that time break, that time frame, and we do, well, I certainly try and read them as best I can, and I know you do, you're very diligent with it too. And they are indeed, but you know, that's the response at the moment, and we will be looking at things further. Thank you.
Councillor Fleming, would you like to answer her second question?
Thank you, Councillor Mansell. I think you have actually asked me this previously, and I think the answer probably isn't exactly what you expected or what you wished for. I think our Suffolk Waste Partnership officers are best positioned to answer it precisely, because I am not in a position to answer it at the moment. There's a fine line between what's compostable and what's biodegradable, and the labelling on packages is really a national issue, if beyond. And I think this is not something for me to answer in this chamber. Thank you.
Councillor Otten, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. First of all, I have some sympathy with members who feel that this session has been cut short. But quite frankly, I think it would be much better if, obviously, the Cabinet members have got their answers, that their answers actually printed and given to the members, because many of those answers were very comprehensive. And I don't know about others, I know I'm getting old and grumpy, but you know, one can't always take it all in, and it would be quite useful to them to have some supplementary question. So I'm assuming that now I can ask questions on the actual reports in the council papers, yeah? Yes. Okay. My first question then is to the Jessica Fleming on your report 3.3 states work continues on the national waste strategy. Officers are working on options, appraisals and potential new service delivery models, accessing future infrastructure needs. And what exactly does that mean, please? On page 61, to the planning cabinet member, I'd like to know why it is that the council is now dismissing the fact that it now has a 5-year land supply in their argument to refuse planning permissions. In advance, developers have used the fact that the council did not have a 5-year land supply to persuade the council to agree to numerous large planning applications. It now seems that the council is saying, oh, that fact that we have a 5.7 housing supply is now considered immaterial. Thank you. And finally, my question, I'm not sure whether that should go to the councillor chair of scrutiny, but I'll do it now because I believe it is also to the leader of the council. Are you fully aware of the conditions that are being imposed on the possible reduction of funding for citizens advice bureaus and the possible reduction in the number of CABs across Suffolk from 7 to 4? Will you be signing those conditions? Thank you.
Do you want to start, Councillor Fleming?
Yes, thank you for your question. And it is a slightly bureaucratic sounding paragraph, I agree. But trying to draw out what it really means, actually the National Waste Strategy is a very important matter, and the government is going to be consulting, well, has in its various stages, some of the early stages have already happened, on various changes to how waste nationally will be managed. I think the objective overall is to try to to make the waste throughout the country more consistent, such that, you know, food waste collection is universally done throughout the country, etc. However, it's very early stages, and we're looking at, you know, responding to consultations we expect to come up in the next year on things like whether we should collect food waste, whether we should collect glass at the curbside, and that sort of thing. If and when those consultations come to us, then I think this chamber will be making some very important decisions or recommendations, more likely, on what we should be doing in the interests of the country and of course, the county and the district. So that's all I can say about it now, but I would recommend that anyone who's interested in this topic, and we probably all are, to keep an eye on the government's website and become familiar with the thought process behind what we can see coming to us.
Councillor Byrne, would you like to answer her second part of the question, or second question? Repeat it.
Land supply.
I didn't understand that question, Councillor Otten. What do you mean by dismissing the fact that it's got a 5-year land supply? I don't understand.
In the past, when the council did not have a 5-year land supply, the council members on the planning committee were told we cannot refuse planning applications because the developers will appeal because the council hasn't got a 5-year land supply. The council now has a 5.7 housing land supply, and yet I believe there are certain recommendations in planning committee that says actually we cannot take that all into consideration. That is not a major consideration.
Okay, yes, I understand it a little better now. The situation is quite complicated, and the combination of factors that are used to determine planning applications sometimes do involve the 5-year land supply, and sometimes, depending on other circumstances, they do not. However, I would rather pass this question to an expert in the matter rather than myself, and I would ask Mr. Isbell if he didn't mind explaining what I can't explain as well as he can.
Thank you. Yes, the situation is unfortunately a complicated one. It was traditionally the case that 5-year land supply was the answer to that question of whether or not the presumption in favour of sustainable development was engaged. That changed in the most recent iteration of the National Policy Framework, and now it is more than that. One must have a plan that is up to date. And the unfortunate thing is that the Keble strategy from 2008 is not considered to be up to date, and the outcome of various appeal decisions have pointed in that direction. The end result with this is that developers are continuing to come forward with schemes, and as Councillor Gould will doubtless attest from the experience that's going on this week in the public inquiry in Eye, the importance of having an up-to-date plan comes back fully front and centre to the question of determining applications in accordance with a plan. So to that extent, the presumption in favour of sustainable development must guide committee, and indeed we had councils attend this week for a member training exercise around both land supply and neighbourhood planning issues, which was organised specifically to try and provide more clarity for all members on the issues of land supply and that presumption in favour of sustainable development.
Thank you. Councillor Morley, would you like to reply about the CAB?
Yes, at its Cabinet meeting a couple of weeks ago, we agreed funding to the CAB of 3 years' worth of £86,000 each year. We have not demanded any conditions on those.
We've actually gone 10 minutes over the half hour. John Field has got one more question, which I'm going to let him ask.
It's not you that are demanding conditions. I think there is a joint agreement across the County Council.
I can't answer for the County Council.
Councillor Field, would you like to ask your question? This is the last question.
I think you'll be overjoyed to hear that Councillor Mansell stole my question. Which is very unreasonable behaviour, but nevertheless much more brief than the alternative. I would just make a point that the answers I didn't think were terribly satisfactory. 1,000 pages is probably 15 hours reading, might be 30 hours reading. It's often quite complex English, which is difficult to decode, on a complex subject, and we owe it to our residents to do that job properly. So I am certainly pretty unhappy about that commitment, and the thought passes my mind that withdrawing your labour was always a good method of responding in a sort of slightly socialist way. So I might consider that, because we really shouldn't get into this sort of position. My residents, it's actually John Whitehead's residents in Barham, and no doubt also pretty fed up that I will get very little time to digest the data before making a decision. So, sorry, that was a statement, not a question. There you go.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 10, Overview and Scrutiny Committee Report. I'd like to invite Councillor Wellham to introduce his report, which is just for noting.
Thank you, Chair. As you'll see, we had 3 separate meetings on the 8th of January, and I have only reported on one of those. I only had about 48 hours to do so, but I have put together this one because I feel it is important that you understand and you have the opportunity to read about the cross-authority task and finish group on citizens' advice. A couple of things I'd like to draw members' attention to, and that is that I feel it's important that Mid Suffolk District Council do not interfere in any way with the service that is provided. There was concern with members in the task and finish group that there were conditions being placed by Suffolk County Council on the Citizens Advice Bureau to reorganise. We discussed that to a degree, and we felt that the office in Stowmarket is well run. It's important to point that out. They have already taken opportunities for efficiency savings and are looking at more, as are other Citizens Advice Bureau, looking at ways of making efficiency savings. Setting conditions and interfering could well lead to the loss of volunteers. We've heard that that volunteers feel that they are members of a group working in a particular bureau, and to try to interfere, we felt, would be counterproductive. I'm happy to take any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Councillor Wellham? Councillor Stringer?
Yeah, I have two questions for the Chair of Scrutiny. I probably would have asked them within the questions to portfolio holders, but you can push democracy back, but it will pop up somewhere else. When we finally get to scrutinising the costs of the move from Needham Market and Hadley into this glass edifice in Ipswich, could we make sure that the unforecast cost of Skype, etc., is actually looked at in detail as to how a business case can be put in front of members with such a glaring error in it, and all of the financial consequences are taken into the round? Can I also ask Scrutiny to look at that we get 24-hour or at least 360 days a year cover in cases where a tree officer needs to attend a tree about to be felled that isn't subject to a TPO, but would have been when the threat was known. We have this bizarre situation in this country where the law doesn't allow you to protect a tree unless it's already got a TPO, it's in a conservation area, or it is about to be threatened, either by a planning application or by somebody with a chainsaw. If we don't have the cover from our tree officers to attend on the day the chainsaw arrives, then we will have exactly what happened in Menisham Green, where we lose a 200-year-old cedar tree for which the farm erected afterwards was named. So can I be assured that Scrutiny will look at that to make sure we have that cover 360 days a year?
Can you give an assurance to that, Councillor Wellham?
If I could answer the first question first, the cost of the move. Scrutiny did attempt to look into some scrutiny of the cost of the move, but we were told that it was too complicated and not all of the information was there for us to come to a conclusion. And so we were persuaded that rather than waste time going round and round and there never being able to get to an answer, it was left in abeyance. We were never going to get a definitive answer on the cost of the move, whether there was savings or whether there was extra expenditure. We felt that it was costing more to have moved than it would have been if we'd stayed where we were, but we could not prove that, and officers couldn't give us the information to prove the opposite either. So I'm afraid that we can't do that. One particular aspect of the move, yes, it may well be possible to look at that. Whether it's a matter for a full scrutiny meeting or not, I will discuss that with the councillor and with officers. The cover for tree officers, I feel that it is important that the officers and the cabinet member have an opportunity to sort that one out first. I'd rather it didn't come to scrutiny as a problem, but rather that the cabinet member, cabinet and officers ought to be able to come to an arrangement whereby there is cover, and then to let scrutiny know what the answer is.
Right, moving on to agenda item 11, the Botesdale and Rickinghall Neighbourhood Development Plan. I'd like to invite Councillor Byrne to introduce paper MC/19/34 and to move the recommendations in the report.
Thank you, Chairman. The report before you updates the Council on the local referendum held on the Botesdale and Rickinghall Neighbourhood Plan. In light of the declared result, it recommends that this plan be formally adopted. Work on the plan commenced in mid-2017. It has been through the appropriate public consultation stages and has been independently examined. It is fit for purpose and will enable planning officers to make informed decisions on applications within the designated area. The local referendum took place on the 28th of November and, as set out in paragraph 4.3 of the report, The declared result was as follows. The total number of votes cast, 433, which was a 25.8% turnout. The number of yes votes cast was 377, that's 87.1% of those who voted, and the number of no votes was 56, 12.9% of those who voted. There were no void ballot papers, and the total number of persons entitled to vote was 1,678. Paragraph 4.6 refers to the appended draft decision statement. A copy of this will be sent to the parish clerk and be published on our website. In 2019, this council adopted 5 neighbourhood plans covering the parishes of Debenham, Stradbroke, Stow Upland, Hawley and Thurston. The decision today sees the Botesdale and Rickinghall neighbourhood plan become the 7th to be formally adopted. To date, we have 17 other neighbourhood plans being progressed across the district, a number of which may come before the council for adoption as the year progresses. I would like to congratulate all those involved in getting this plan to the adoption stage, and I ask the council to endorse the recommendation before it. I would look for a seconder for that motion, please.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Number 12, councillor appointments. Councillor Morley, I believe you have some changes to placings.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have some changes to the Shared Revenues Partnership. I wish to appoint Councillor Brewster and Councillor Fleming as named substitutes, joining myself and Councillor Whitehead on the Shared Revenues Partnership. Cabinet appointments. I'm really pleased to announce that Peter Gould will be taking up the Cabinet position of Assets and Investments immediately. And I'm also really excited to welcome Councillor Harry Richardson to the front bench as a cabinet member without portfolio. And again, that's effective immediately. And as a result of Harry joining the front bench, I'm really pleased to announce that Councillor Caston will be replacing Harry on the Planning Committee. Thank you.
Are there any further changes? Could I have a proposer? And could I have a seconder?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you. That's just the book of the committee places, not the cabinet. All those in favour? And those against? Those abstaining? That's carried. Right, that's it. And the date of the next meeting is Thursday, the 27th of February at 5:30. Thanks very much. Bye. Oh, sorry.
I've just noticed I was inputting earlier today all the dates of all the full council meetings in my diary through to 2021, because obviously none of us want to miss any. I noticed that I've been given the 22nd of October as a meeting, which is the same day as another authority's full council in this same chamber. And I think the chance of them finishing by 5:30.
We did have an email about this last week saying we'd have it on the Monday, didn't we?
Oh, did we?
Yes.
I've
Read
got
your emails.
Okay, well, that's fine. Good.
Councillor Mounsell, hang on.
Sorry, I don't recall having an email on Monday about a change of a date. So I'm sorry it hasn't been out to email.
Oh, right. Oh, I've had one.